Now, we do have to remember that the Oilers have never lost to the Montreal Canadiens or the Winnipeg Jets in the playoffs. That is a long time ago, however, decades ago. But now, who do you think the Oilers would fare better against in a first round matchup? The Jets or the Canadiens?
I would say they would rather face the Jets, even though they have more offensive weapons and top three lines that are pretty deep, and a Vezina trophy winner in Hellebuck. I think they'd rather play the Jets because the Jets play a similar game to the Oilers. I think the Canadiens play a greasier game, and as long as the referees let the greasiness go on, as has been proven this year when the Oilers have had trouble beating Montreal, I think that's more of an exercise for the Oilers. I know Draisaitl only has 3 points against Montreal all year, 3 assists, and McDavid had finally broke out the last couple of times they played Montreal. But as long as the refs are going to let the big defensemen on Montreal, Weber and Sherratt and Edmondson and Petrie and stuff, be aggressive and let the forwards be greasy on them, I think the Oilers would much rather play Winnipeg. Not just because they're 7-2 against Winnipeg. I just think that Winnipeg plays an up-tempo kind of offensive game, and the Oilers play the same, but the Oilers are better at it.
Now, the Oilers did manage to beat the Canadiens at times this year and in more recent games.
Games are always close. The games are close, and even Montreal with no... Theoretically, they don't really have much offense to their team other than, say, Toffoli, Gallagher before he got hurt. They don't have a lot of offense to their team, but they keep the games close and the games are low scoring. There's a frustration level there that the Oilers see when they play Montreal, and there's a confidence level that Montreal sees when they play the Oilers. Even though they've got McDavid and Draisaitl, they realize that they've been able to hold them for the most part in check. Well, that confidence going into the playoffs, over a regular season will certainly, will be a boost. Now, they haven't played Montreal the two of the final 3 games. We'll see how the Oilers do next week against Montreal. If they beat them 5-1 and 5-1, it's a different story. But there haven't been too many of those games against Montreal this year.
But when the playoffs come, the stakes are higher. Obviously it's win or go home eventually. It's a 7-game series. You have to win 4. Who would that play more to? Who would benefit from that factor more? The higher stakes, Edmonton or Montreal?
Well, it's difficult to win 4 games against any team. It's a good point. It should benefit the Oilers because they have, as the playoff wears on, they've got more offensive weapons. You'd think that even if they're held down early, they'll break out. Conversely, however, if the team that's perceived to be weaker wins the first game, say, of a best of 7, then it's a struggle for the stronger team, as it was last year when the Oilers lost the first game to the Blackhawks. In a best of 5, it was an uphill battle after that. The Oilers ended up losing. So, best of 7, the better team should win. But Montreal, like I said, has proven so far in the 7 games that, to be honest, they're better than the Oilers. They've been better than the Oilers pretty much. They won 5, the Oilers won 2, so they've been better.
I do realize the Oilers did win the season series over the Jets, and the Jets just recently have gone on a losing skid. But here we are nearing the end of the season. They still have a few games left, all depending on how these play out. When would a team use that as, maybe launching pad isn't the right term, use that to motivate themselves heading into the postseason, trying to come back from a skid like that?
As long as they come out of the skid, that's the problem. I know you'd rather lose 7 games now than go into the playoffs and lose 4 straight and be out in a week, because that was the only time all year you've had a bad patch, and this is the only time all year the Jets have had a bad patch. I don't think they'd lost 2 games in regulation for months before suddenly losing 7. Not even getting a point in those 7 games. It can be motivation, but if you ask around now, people are writing off the Jets, saying they just look totally, there's no energy, they look disorganized, their big guns aren't scoring. This is not, what you want going into the playoffs. And the playoffs are only 2 weeks away, and the Jets can't seem to get out of it. So they're going to have to win 2-3 games before they get into the playoffs before you can say that they're out of this. If you suddenly, get to the end and they win the last game of the regular season and that's not a launching pad to the playoffs. I mean, they've got to be going much better before that. And, it's kind of surprising because I thought the Jets were the most consistent team in the whole division all year. They just managed to play good against pretty much everybody, and they didn't hardly ever lose a game. And now they just looked sapped, like there's nothing there. And I don't think that the trade line for Dubois, it certainly hasn't worked out for Columbus. I don't think it's worked out all that well for Winnipeg either. I think Dubois has been very ordinary as the second line center there, and I think they were looking for a little bit more from a young guy, big guy, and I don't think there's been much there. I know one thing, Winnipeg's window it's not like Edmonton's window where their best players, the two studs are, 24 years old, 24, 25. Winnipeg's Wheeler's old. Scheifele's been there for quite some time. They're not as young as the Oilers are, and their window, I don't think, is quite as wide open as the Oilers. So their pressure on them is a little bit more. And a couple of years ago, remember, they lost to Nashville, and I thought that was the best Winnipeg team I've seen in years and years and years, and they lost. Well, that's several years removed from that. They haven't got perceptibly better, let's put it this way. So I think their window is a lot smaller than the Oilers is.
I was going to reference that. That was 3 years ago, 2018, when they played Nashville and played Vegas eventually in the conference final. And the nucleus in the Jets forward ranks is still there from then, with Scheifele minus Laine, Wheeler's there, and they have Hellebuck and net.
The defense is not as good. No Bufflin, no Trouba, no Sherratt, no Myers. Their defense is not as good. It's certainly smaller. Not as good, and I think that's hurt them to a degree too. I mean, they could play a tougher game around the net than they do now, and it's funny about Winnipeg. And then last year Winnipeg played, and then Scheifele got hurt against Calgary early. Then when he got hurt, they were done. They just didn't have anybody to replace him. So that's a key as well. I mean, they were out as fast as the Oilers were last year.
I guess what I'm getting at is we had that example last year. Scheifele and Laine were both taken out of the series against the Flames in the first game, and the Jets were done very quickly. But they're a veteran team. They have playoff experience, the pedigree that goes back to 2018 when they were in the conference finals against Vegas. And here we are 3 years later, and you're right, the window is starting to close for them, certainly faster than it is on the Oilers, whose is just pretty much just opening, if it's not wide open right now. But I guess I would wonder if the Jets can dig into that playoff experience they have and rise to the occasion, especially considering last year's disappointing qualifying round loss to Calgary.
They can. I think, like I said, their first three lines are very, very good. Better, probably, their top three lines are better than any other team in the division. Hellebuck has to outplay whatever goalie they're playing against, I think. And if they're playing the Oilers and Mike Smith plays well, the Oilers are better, I think. But Hellebuck, if he plays like the Vezina Trophy winner, Winnipeg's got to, would probably have the upper hand. But this year he hasn't played like the Vezina Trophy winner, so which is why they're not quite as good either. Last year he was outstanding. This year he's been good but not great.